Coming up on our newscast tonight. A special committee dedicated to preparations for the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit conducts its first meeting. Its role is crucial now that it's confirmed the historic face-to-face will be a one-day event. Seoul and Washington meet to discuss possible trade deal revision. Again, the core subject in round 3 of talks, U.S. tariff on steel imports. South Korean curlers continue their relentless medal pursuit in the Alpine city, while the nation's ice sledge hockey squad prepares to take on Italy for the bronze. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel Chang. South Korean officials are making rapid progress in preparing for a summit with North Korea next month aimed at reducing tensions on the peninsula. Our Chief Cheongwade correspondent Moon Gun-young starts us off.
The preparation committee has decided to hold South-North Korea high-level talks in late March over the planned Inter-Korean Summit. We plan to officially propose the talks to North Korea.
The South Korean president's chief of staff, who chairs the Interagency Preparation Committee for the Inter-Korean Summit slated for late April, made the announcement following the first meeting of the committee Friday afternoon. Seoul will make a request to hold a high-level talks with Pyongyang over a planned summit meeting of their leaders to be held sometime in late March, where officials of the two sides will discuss key agenda topics.
We've decided to narrow down the summit agenda and focus the talking points on securing permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula through denuclearization and dramatic reduction of military tensions, and on drawing up ways for new, bold progress in inter-Korean relations.
This, the key player in creating the Olympic-led détente with North Korea last month, said was upon confirmation by the committee that the April Inter-Korean Summit should serve as a major turning point in fundamentally addressing the issue of peace on the Korean Peninsula. The South delegation to the high-level preparatory talks will likely be led by Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun, who also headed the talks leading up to the South presidential envoy's trip to North Korea earlier this month. Im also said South Korea will send an art troupe and a taekwondo demonstration team to the north in early April. Those groups will be led by Seoul's Culture and Sports Minister Do Jong-hwan. South Korean President Moon and North Korean leader Kim are set to meet on the southern side of the straddled border village of Panmunjom in late April in what will be the third Inter-Korean Summit following ones in 2000 and 2007. While the summit will be historic as is, it carries all the more weight as the Moon-Kim meeting is expected to lay the ground for what could be a monumental summit between the leaders of North Korea and the United States. For that, Mr. Moon's chief of staff said the South Korean president could meet with U.S. President Trump after the Inter-Korean Summit, but before the planned Trump-Kim summit in May. Meanwhile, in a telephone call between President Moon and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Mr. Abe expressed Tokyo's wish for talks with North Korea following Pyongyang summits with South Korea and the United States. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
Next week, the schedules for the postponed annual Seoul-Washington combined military exercises will be released. Many wonder if the drills will be downsized or shortened to help keep the momentum going for talks with North Korea. Oh Jung-hee explores the possible changes.
South Korea and the United States are set to release the specifics of their annual spring exercises, key resolve in full legal, next week. The drills were originally supposed to kick off in late February or early March, but were postponed until after the PyeongChang Winter Olympics and Paralympics to encourage North Korea's participation in the Games. Whether the drills will be held as normal is a major question. Some think South Korea might want to scale down or shorten them to help continue the thaw in relations with the North. The Defense Ministry in Seoul has been firm that the drills will be held, but it's been tight-lipped about the possibility of making them shorter or smaller. Any further details, it said, will only come out after the Paralympics end on March 18th. But local media reports say that the drills will in fact be shortened and held at a lower intensity than previous years. They say roughly 200,000 people will be involved, 100,000 less than previous years, and the drills will focus on defensive operations. The full legal exercise of field drill will reportedly begin in early April but last for only 1 month, not 2. And unlike the past 2 years, it may not involve B-1B bombers or nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Key Resolve, which is a computerized simulation, is expected to be held for 2 weeks starting mid-April, and military sources say it will be on a scale similar to last year's. The exercise will simulate countering a North Korean attack and striking Pyongyang's nuclear and missile facilities. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Newly released satellite imagery of North Korea shows concerning activity at one of its nuclear reactors. With a landmark meeting with the U.S. set in May, such development is likely to unnerve observers, but experts warn against jumping to conclusions. Kwon Jang-ho explains further.
Western researchers have released a report which suggests that preliminary testing has begun at one of North Korea's nuclear reactors at the Yongbyon Research Facility. Published in Jane's Intelligence Review, the report analysed satellite images which showed emissions rising from what looks like an experimental light water reactor. However, the report was unable to conclude whether it was being used for civilian electricity generation, its stated purpose, or being diverted towards the nuclear weapons program. The footage was taken on February 25th before North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told the visiting South Korean delegation that he was open to holding talks with the US. Although activity at this facility does not necessarily violate Kim's agreement to halt all missile and nuclear weapons testing until the talks, the tentative nature of the relationship means any nuclear-related activity could be unsettling. But the Yongbyon facility has been well known for some time, meaning that it's unlikely to cause alarm or disrupt the dialogue proceedings.
This reactor didn't just drop out of the sky. We've been aware of its existence since they started building it in the late 2000s. Even throughout last year, there were many reports about its activity. Of course, we should keep an eye on it, but it would be irresponsible to get ahead of ourselves and accuse North Korea of malicious intent right now.
The expert added, however, that in the future it could become a target for inspections if the US and North Korea are able to reach a deal for the regime to denuclearize. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Hi, I'm Lee Ji-won here with the latest on the PyeongChang 2018 Winter Paralympics. We start with the mixed wheelchair curling. After a tight game, Korea lost its semifinal against Norway. The two sides rallied back and forth until the 8th end when they were tied 6-6. But in the extra end, Team Korea made a number of mistakes, losing 2 points and ending the game 8-6. Meanwhile, in the other semifinal match, which was played at the same time, China beat Canada, earning its place in the final. Korea will be playing against Canada for the bronze medal on Saturday. Over in the final biathlon events, the women's 12.5-kilometer and men's 15-kilometer races were held today. 5 skiers represented Team Korea, including Lee Do-yeon, Shin Hee-hyun, and Lee Jung-min. Lee Do-yeon finished in 57 minutes 27.3 seconds, ranking 11th. Shin Hee-hyun came in at 49 minutes 20.7 seconds, and Lee Jung-min at 51 minutes 7.1 seconds, standing in 5th and 7th place respectively. In the ice sledge hockey competition, Korea will face off against Italy on Saturday in the bronze medal match after the host nation was comfortably beaten by Canada in Thursday's semifinal. Team Korea went down 7-0 to the world's best team, who have not let in a single goal at this Paralympics. Organizers are expecting a sellout crowd for Saturday's game against Italy. The para-ice hockey games have been a big hit with fans. Crowds of over 6,000 people have filled the ice hockey stadium for the past few games. The 6,300 tickets for Korea's bronze medal game have already been sold out, and only the 400 stand-in tickets are remaining, which will be sold from 2 hours before the start of the game. So for those of you who want to watch the game live, make sure to arrive early and get in front of the line. Now on to some standout events for Saturday. On top of the bronze medal game in para ice hockey, there will be a number of medals up for grabs for Team Korea. Having lost the semi-final against Norway in wheelchair curling, Team Korea will be fighting for bronze medal against Canada tomorrow morning. Shin Hee-yeon's hunt for medals will also continue in the men's 7.5-kilometer sitting cross-country event. With Shin having won Korea's one and only medal in this Paralympics so far, there are many hopes that Shin will once again stand on the podium over the weekend. The alpine skiers will also have their last shot at medals in the men's slalom event held for tomorrow morning. Korea's Han Sang-min, Lee Chi-won will be skiing in the sitting event, and Hwang Min-kyu will be racing in the event for the visually impaired. With that, let's look at the medal table.
All right, Jiwon, thank you for this recap and the preview of what's to come in PyeongChang. We appreciate it. Gangwon province is pulling out all the stops to make sure they play a great host during the global sporting event. One way is to provide greater convenience to Paralympians and visitors with disabilities. Cha Sang-mi sheds light on the various facilities and services designed with that purpose in mind.
There's just a few more days until the end of the PyeongChang 2018 Winter Paralympics. But the venues are still crowded with visitors who are here to watch the games or tour around the Olympic Plaza. And the organizers have made sure those places are accessible for visitors with disabilities. At the PyeongChang 2018 Winter Paralympics, there's a range of facilities and services for athletes and visitors with disabilities. The Sign Language Translation Service is one such service aimed at helping the participants. This phone comes with a small screen that allows the receiver to see the caller. Interpreters at this center provide a remote Korean Sign Language translation service for any athletes or visitors who need it, so that they can ask for directions and find out the game schedule or transport information. The interpreters are on standby from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day to help interpret communication between the visitors and help desk staff on site. Apart from the remote sign language translation services, more than a dozen interpreters are actually working on site, providing direct services to those in need of a hand.
I currently provide sign language translation services here at PyeongChang Olympic Plaza for those with hearing impairments. I help them with directions to and from Paralympic Games venues.
Transportation is also visitor-friendly. Ordinary Seoul buses have been remodeled to cater to visitors with wheelchairs, providing them with enough space so they can safely travel around the venues.
We have also arranged volunteer services for individual visitors with disabilities so that the volunteers can accompany them from the moment they get off the shuttle bus.
A wide range of facilities for the handicapped have also been expanded around the Paralympic venues. Wheelchair users can use these accessibility ramps to enter buildings like this souvenir shop. Braille blocks and handicapped restrooms have also been added throughout the PyeongChang area to help visitors.
Just in time for the Paralympics, our shopping arcade prepared several facilities for both the general public and for people with disabilities.
With more facilities and services added for the Paralympics, the mountainous counties of Gangwon-do have become a friendly environment for anyone who wants to visit, even after the Games. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News, PyeongChang.
President Moon Jae-in attended a special ceremony declaring the future vision for the port of Busan. The Liberal leader pledged to upgrade it to a global shipping hub as the country enters an unprecedented transition period. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us his remarks.
With the Inter-Korean Summit and the summit between Pyongyang and Washington just around the corner, is a chance, says President Moon Jae-in, for South Korea to take a leadership role on the world stage.
지금 우리는 남북 정상회담, 북미 정상회담을 앞두고 있습니다. 세계사적인 대전환을 준비하고 있습니다. 우리가 이 기회를 잘 살려내 남북한을 잇는다면 한반도의 운명도 극적으로 변하게 될 것입니다.
Those remarks were made during President Moon's speech at a special ceremony where he announced his future vision for Busan, South Korea's largest port. If things play out right, he said, Busan can become the bridge between Eurasia to the north and the oceans to the south, all the way to the ASEAN nations and India. And to that end, President Moon pledged that the government will invest in the port of Busan and provide ample support for innovation there, which will ultimately lead to the transformation of Korea's second-largest city.
부산은 대한민국 해양 수도를 넘어 아시아의 해양 수도가 될 것입니다. 철도, 공항과 함께 육해공이 연계되는 동북아 물류 거점 도시가 될 것입니다.
The president praised the accomplishment of the port of Busan, which processed more than 400 million tons of cargo last year, making it the world's second-largest port of exchange. He said innovation at the port of Busan is the key to the success of the administration's efforts to expand South Korea's diplomatic horizons in Eurasia and Southeast Asia via the New Northern and New Southern policies. So President Moon pledged to equip the port with fourth industrial revolution technologies, including smart shipping systems and high-speed communications. He also unveiled the government's plan to supersize the port by the year 2030 by increasing the number of berths from the current 21 to 40. That would enable it to handle 30 million containers per year. In addition, the plan calls for the creation of a liquefied natural gas fueling center for ships and a shipyard for vessel repairs, which will create added value and new jobs. President Moon's Friday visit to Busan was the fourth of its kind since his inauguration, which observers say may have been meant to garner support for the ruling Democratic Party in June's local elections. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Seoul and Washington wrapped up day one in the third round of meetings over amending their bilateral trade pact. Naturally, talks center around factors related to America's protectionist moves that fuel fears of a global trade war. Kim Hye-sung has the highlights from that session.
Round 3. South Korea and the U.S. began their third round of talks over a possible amendment to their bilateral free trade deal in Washington on Thursday local time. South Korea's Yoo Myung-hee, the Trade Ministry's deputy minister for FTA negotiations, led the talks with their U.S. counterpart, Assistant U.S. Trade Representative Michael Beeman. During the 7.5-hour negotiations, the Korean representatives argued that the 25% tariff on steel imports scheduled to be imposed later this month is unfair. President Trump signed off on the steel and aluminum tariff measures last week, giving temporary exemptions to only Canada and Mexico amid the ongoing renegotiation of the NAFTA agreement.
Seoul and Washington already know what each other wants through the two previous rounds of talks. Seoul is somewhat at a disadvantage in terms of negotiation leverage due to the U.S. steel tariff measures, but we are at the third round of talks. This is a time for give and take, making concessions, so the talks will be more in-depth and aggressive.
Seoul also asserted that the trade deal's investor-state dispute settlements clauses need revising and lodged a complaint against the Trump administration's safeguard measures such as high tariffs on Korean washing machines and solar panels. The U.S., on the other hand, reiterated that South Korea needs to lower its non-tariff barriers, especially in the automobile and auto parts sectors, and strengthen its country of origin system. The two sides will hold their second day of talks on Friday morning. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
It seems a long and tumultuous path looms ahead in the process of revising the nation's constitution. The main opposition came up with its own roadmap, rejecting President Moon's timeline to finalize the vote by June. For details, let's turn to our Lee Jung-yeon.
The Korean government is set to submit a draft to the National Assembly next Wednesday on the Constitution's revision. According to the Blue House, a special advisory committee briefed President Moon Jae-in on its version of the reform, from which the government will submit a final government draft. The main point of the amendment is changing the current 5-year single presidential term to a 4-year term with one re-election. President Moon has pushed for a referendum vote to take place in June, along with local elections, so as to minimize expenditure on a national referendum that would cost up to 120 billion won, or $113 million. With this move by the president, the parliament is pressured to make its own move, as the draft put forth by the parliament would be prioritized over that of the government. To this, the main opposition Liberty Korea Party came up with its own roadmap for the revision on Friday. The key point of the party is to delegate more presidential power to the Prime Minister and have another body appoint such role, preferably the National Assembly, rather than the president as is under the current system. Representative Kim Sung-tae, floor leader of the Liberty Korea Party, unveiled the roadmap and urged other rival parties to submit a joint revision bill by June. By setting this deadline, the main opposition has essentially rejected President Moon's timeline of holding the referendum in June, arguing that holding the referendum with the local elections could politicize the issue. Lee Jung-hyun, Arirang News.
Part of the Moon administration's plan to bring down unemployment rate among youths is subsidizing smaller firms using a supplementary budget. A move deemed necessary as low pay is a key reason job seekers choose not to join such organizations. But experts argue this may not be enough to solve the structural problems of Korea's labor market. Park Hee-jun brings us their analysis.
The Korean government announced Thursday that it's planning a supplementary budget worth around $3.8 billion to help solve youth unemployment. If passed by parliament, it would be the second extra budget executed by the Moon Jae-in administration. But this time, it's focused on payroll subsidies for small and medium-sized companies and providing financial support for young people hired by those firms. But while it may be good news for small and medium-sized companies, experts are skeptical about whether the extra budget will be able to effectively tackle the high levels of youth unemployment.
Just putting some trillions of money into the system won't be the right solution. The government is trying to implement a kind of emergency kind of job creation. And I think that's kind of a transitory solution to the problem.
One of the biggest challenges in the labor market is the growing mismatch between the jobs that are available and young people's preference for high-paying jobs at big companies.
The wage gap would be something like when you index large companies' wage as 100, then small and medium-sized companies' wage would be something like a 65 or somewhere between 60 and 70. Unless you tackle with this wage gap problem, it will be very difficult to persuade young laborers, young people to go to small and medium-sized companies.
And even if the new plan provides incentives such as cheap loans for apartment rental deposits and transportation allowances, economists predict it still won't be enough to change things for the younger generation.
That's a temporary subsidy which has to be financed by the tax revenue. And this kind of a temporary measure will have a limitation. I really do not think that young laborers would find it comfortable to work in a small, medium-sized company with such a temporary subsidy.
To prevent the new supplementary budget from becoming another expensive failure, there are calls for a practical solution that not only stimulates smaller firms' productivity, but also actively brings in younger workers. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the update you need. Michelle, the weather has gotten cold all of a sudden. What can we expect in the remaining days of the Winter Paralympics in PyeongChang?
Well, Daniel, in PyeongChang tomorrow, the sun is expected to raise the temperatures all day. But on Sunday, the day of the Paralympic closing ceremony, strong winds after sunset are expected to bring the wind chill down to -8 degrees Celsius. Now, Saturday morning will be cold with Arctic air blowing from the north. Now, Seoul will be waking up to 1 degree Celsius, Daegu at -1, Busan at 2 degrees. And today, the temperatures will bounce back up with Seoul rising up to 13 degrees. Other than the huge temperature gaps, the weather looks favorable, but by the middle of next week, another spring shower is expected nationwide, which will keep down our highs from rising. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you on this Friday night's edition of Arirang News Center. As always, thank you for staying with us. Here's wishing you an amazing weekend.